Jonathan? Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm here on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nation, and I'm joined by my colleague Bruce Ralston, the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. We're here today to talk about where we're at and where we're going, quite frankly, on the next steps with respect to the Site C power project. As you know, the project has been facing significant challenges. First, managing the contract that the BC Liberals signed has been difficult because it transfers the vast majority of the geotechnical risk back to BC Hydro. Secondly, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented challenges and construction delays that we could have never foreseen. And lastly, of course, and most importantly, and the focus of our discussion today, is the geotechnical issues that were discovered after we made the decision in 2017 to continue with the project. As a result, we took the following actions. We asked experts to examine the project and offer independent advice. Peter Milburn has provided us with recommendations that mean we will have stronger project oversight, improved risk management, and a better construction and claims management process with respect to the contract. And we're moving forward on all of those recommendations. As well, we're putting in new leadership on the board of BC Hydro. In addition, we asked two world-leading experts on dam safety and geotechnical challenges to make sure that the fix that had been arrived at by the engineers and the consultants was acceptable. And they confirmed that the project can proceed safely and will be built to the highest dam standards. Based on this advice, we're confident that the project can and should be completed safely. So today I am confirming that the Site C Clean Energy Project will be completed. That decision came through due diligence and care and deliberation on what was in the best interest of all British Columbians, and I believe today we've made the right decision. Completing Site C will help power our province well into the future with clean energy as we electrify our economy. It will keep our rates among the lowest in North America, and that, of course, is what everybody wants at home and around the province today. Cancelling Site C when it was half done would have meant laying off 4,500 workers just as we're coming out of the economic impact of the pandemic. It would have left us with a $10 billion debt and nothing to show for it. That $10 billion debt would have meant a rapid increase in rates for people, on average about $216 a year starting right away, and that was also something that we were not prepared to do. So we will not put the jobs at risk, we will not shock people's hydro bills, and we want to make sure that the financial implications of this project will be felt not immediately, but over the life of the project. By going through to completion, that ensures that we can pay for this valuable asset over the next 100 years, not over the next 100 days. I believe that continuing with this project is difficult for many. I know there are a lot of British Columbians who have never accepted this as an appropriate way for BC Hydro to go. We deliberated on that very question in 2017 and came to the conclusion that it was in the best interest of British Columbians to proceed with the project. The former government started the project to get it past the point of no return. We are going to complete the project because it's in the best interest of British Columbians. And I'm going to ask Minister Ralston to provide more of the details of the findings of Mr. Milburn, the experts, and then we'll be happy to entertain the many questions I'm sure you will have.
Good morning. Thank you, Premier. I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. With the advice of independent experts guiding us, I am confident in the path forward for Site C. Most importantly, we know that Site C can be built and operated safely. Completing the project is the best option to protect ratepayers, British Columbians, and the fiscal plan. Peter Milburn has provided us with a path forward to improve risk management and oversight, a path forward to complete Site C. We couldn't have predicted the COVID-19 pandemic, nor the impact it has had on the project's budget and timeline. In response to the impacts of the pandemic, the geotechnical situation, and other challenges facing the project, we acted to appoint Peter Milburn as a special advisor. Mr. Milburn compiled a team of 8 other individuals with specialized expertise in major capital projects, construction management, and engineering to give our government an independent, comprehensive review focused on management and oversight of the project. We also had to address concerns that were brought to light around geotechnical issues at the site. BC Hydro developed a solution. To ensure the solution proposed is safe and feasible, we asked 2 independent world-leading experts, John France and Dr. Carrie Hogue, to review the measures proposed to address geotechnical challenges. With the information available to us now, we feel there is a path forward for the Site C project. The reports from John France and Carrie Hogue have assured us there's a safe and reliable fix to the geotechnical issues. Peter Milburn has provided us with 17 recommendations to improve project oversight and commercial and risk management. We have accepted all his recommendations and indeed are implementing some of them already. As the Premier mentioned, we are making changes at BC Hydro and bringing in new leadership. Doug Allen will replace Ken Peterson as chair of the BC Hydro board. Mr. Allen has extensive experience in the public and private sectors, most recently on the board of directors at ICBC. He is also the previous interim CEO of TransLink and BC Ferries and has served as the deputy minister of 5 different provincial ministries. Our decision to continue Site C is also based on the stark financial realities when comparing the impacts of completing the project versus those of terminating it. Site C is over half built and employs 4,500 workers. Cancelling the project at this point would immediately leave British Columbians on the hook for at least $10 billion with no asset to show for it. That amount of debt cannot be spread out over decades like the cost of completing the project, but would have to be taken on immediately by taxpayers or ratepayers. In either case, the impacts would be severe and would deal a crippling blow to people and to BC Hydro when we are trying to build back lives and businesses from the impacts of the pandemic. And at the end of the day, we would still need to invest in new sources of power to meet BC's future energy needs and our climate targets. Our government takes the situation at Site C seriously. A year-long delay due to COVID, foundation enhancements, and other cost pressures. The new revised cost estimate is now $16 billion. The project in-service date is now 2025. The cost of Site C will be spread out in rates over 70 years or more, and that begins only when the assets come into service. That means, even at the higher cost, the rate impacts are manageable. By the end of the decade, rates will be about 3% higher, or $36 per year for the average residential customer. Rate increases are expected to remain below the rate of inflation over the next decade. Site C is being built to supply British Columbians with clean, reliable power for the next 100 years. It will provide the renewable energy we need to electrify our economy, get off fossil fuels, and meet BC's climate targets. We are going to need significantly more renewable energy as we make the switch to electric vehicles and power our buildings and industries with clean electricity instead of fossil fuels. We have kept the people of British Columbia at the center of our decisions throughout our deliberations on Site C. We needed to make sure it was based on comprehensive, independent analysis. I appreciate everyone's patience while we gathered the expert information and took the time to digest, understand, and to act upon it. Continuing with Site C is the best decision for today and for the future. Thank you.
A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. We're going to go with one question and one follow-up today. Our first question is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail.
Thanks, Jen. Premier, I'm going to quote from one of these reports that we were released today. It says, Mr. France and Dr. Hogue acknowledged there is some uncertainty about the foundation conditions for the Earthfill Dam, as that area has yet to be excavated, mapped, and grouted. So my question to you is, how confident are you that this project will actually be completed and in service on time and on the new budget of $16 billion?
Well, I'm confident with the recommendations that Peter Milburn brought forward and the advice and counsel of experts with respect to dam safety and new leadership at the Project Assurance Board as well as at the chair of BC Hydro. We will be looking at these issues in extreme detail over the next number of years, and I am confident that we will get a finished project that will provide energy for British Columbians for generations to come.
Follow-up?
Yes, and I assume that means at that price of $16 billion, Premier, but you also promised more project oversight back in 2017. This fall, you said you were unaware of the emerging geotechnical problems until they were publicly disclosed in the summer. So now you're making all these changes to improve oversight. You've got new leadership. How did we get $6 billion into this project without seeing these gaps in oversight that you're now addressing?
Well, Mr. Milburn's report says that the oversight processes that were put in place were appropriate, but we perhaps populated those committees with the wrong individuals. And that's not a slight on those individuals, but he suggested that we have different expertise at the table. In addition, the technical advisory committees were looking at solutions. My father-in-law was an engineer. If you know any engineers, they're focused on fixing things, finding problems, and then seeking solutions. So the team at that Site C at the project found a challenge, and then they set about trying to solve that challenge. That information did not come completely to government until this past year, last May and into the summer of 2020. And that is as appropriate as it should be, I believe, in these circumstances, but we need to do better. Mr. Milburn lays out the path for that to happen, and we're going to put in place the appropriate individuals to ensure that that information comes to government in a timely way. We'll be managing it through the processes internal to government, as well as new processes at BC Hydro.
Next question is from Vaughn Palmer, Vancouver Sun.
Good day, Premier. The Milburn Report, page 19. We find it important to note that the risk of additional geotechnical issues on this project continues. In light of that assessment, why should anyone assume this is the end of the overruns and the end of the geotechnical problems with Site C?
Well, Vaughn, as you know, this piece of British Columbia has been reviewed and analyzed and assessed for decades and decades with the view of constructing a hydroelectric dam. We were aware before the BC Liberals entered into the contract that they signed to get the project going of the challenges on the left bank of the project. The BC Utilities Commission, had they been asked early in the process, may well have had expert witnesses giving that information directly to the public. The BC Liberals short-circuited that. That information wasn't made public. In 2017, when we were reviewing the go-ahead or cease the project, we were aware of geotechnical challenges on the left bank. We asked the appropriate experts at that time, we deliberated, and we made the choice to proceed. The challenges on the right bank, which were the subject of the significant challenges that we discovered coming to government last year, were not known at that time. And in fact, it was a 5 millimeter shift 35 meters below the surface that alerted the engineers at the project that there may be difficulty in that area. So they set about coming forward with solutions, and that's what brought us here today. I am confident, based on all of the work that's been done over many, many years, the team that is in place today and the additional eyes and ears that we're going to be putting in place will be sufficient to get the project completed within the allocated resources that Treasury Board's made available.
Vaughn, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, the Milburn report faults hydro on a number of points: anticipating risk, quantifying risks, tracking risks, mitigating risks, and communicating all that information about risks to the provincial government. Do those successive failings explain the change of at the top at BC Hydro that you've announced today? And should we assume there will be more changes in staffing and leadership at BC Hydro in light of these large number of failings on the risk management file?
Well, this has certainly been a challenging project, Vaughn. Mr. Milburn's report lays that out in intimate detail. We believe that Doug Allen has the right set of skills and experience within government, within Crown corporations, as well as within the private sector, to bring to bear the types of changes that Mr. Milburn is recommending. So I'm confident that those shortcomings, and I don't want to, again, Mr. Milburn is abundantly clear that there was no malice here. There was no nothing other than maybe what they characterize as engineer bias, which is there's no problem that we can't fix. And I accept that. And now we need to make sure that when problems are emerging, we hear about them when they're discovered, not at the point where the engineers believe they've found the solution. I think those basic changes that Mr. Milburn recommends will be implemented by Mr. Allen, and we'll be in a much better position as a result. But I am not here today to put blame on anyone. The project has been beset with challenges before it began, when it was begun by the previous government, and when we inherited it in 2017. But as Bruce said, and as I fully agree, we need to get this completed to benefit not this generation, but future generations. This asset is not for tomorrow or next month or next year. It's for the next 100 years. And as we are living in a carbon-constrained world, the more green energy we can build, the better off British Columbians will be. We need to keep rates down for people. Suspending the project would have not achieved that goal, would have put 4,500 people out of work. And as we come out of a transformative global pandemic, we need to stay the course, get this project completed, and continue to be world leaders when it comes to green energy.
Our next question is from Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Premier, how are you going to respond to the ongoing concerns from Indigenous and environmental groups, especially given the court challenge that's been put forward by the West Moberly First Nation? What kind of cost are we looking at to reverse all of this if you lose that court case?
Well, the West Moberly case, I believe, is not slated to be heard until next year, next spring. So it's over a year away. We are in discussion with the West Moberly on a range of issues of mutual concern, not just around this project, but a whole host of issues that will affect the West Moberly. We've had a very positive working relationship with them when it came to protecting caribou, and the caribou solution that we came up with together was a direct result of extraordinary leadership by West Moberly. West Moberly is supportive of natural gas development in their communities or in their territory. This is an issue that has been a significant concern to West Moberly for decades. And we will continue to work with them to try and find a way forward, not just on this project, but all of the other mutual interests and mutual concerns that we have in their territory. Having said that, there are a host of other Indigenous communities that are benefiting significantly from this project. They have benefit agreements in place. Businesses have been started, small contractors to provide services at the site. People are working on the site. The net benefit, broadly speaking, to the Peace Country is significant. Obviously, there are always impacts when you have a project of this magnitude, but on balance, we're confident that there's a net benefit to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples alike in the territory. And again, this is not a project for next week or next month or next year. It's a project for generations to come.
Tanya, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Thank you. A number of those First Nations have said in the past that they signed benefit agreements under duress because they believe there's no way to stop the project. What does this say about your approach to nation governance?
Those contracts were not, those benefit agreements were signed by the previous government. If there was any duress, that was never brought to my attention. We inherited a project that we wouldn't have started, and we are doing the best we can to live up to the obligations that the former government put in place on the people in the region, on the people of British Columbia with the contract that they signed. And we are doing what I think all British Columbians would expect of us. Doing the best we can to deal with circumstances as they present themselves. Life is complicated. Government is complicated. We could have not anticipated a global pandemic. We're managing that to the best of our ability. The people of British Columbia are working hard and making significant sacrifices. It's not any different in this instance. If there are concerns about the agreements, I've not heard directly from any Indigenous communities, but I certainly look forward to talking to the Minister, Murray Rankin, to ensure that we do a review based on the information you just provided me.
Next question is from Mary Griffin. Check.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much for taking my question. Premier, I'm just pivoting a little bit to ask. I know you tweeted about it yesterday, but Dr. Henry was asked and commented on these threats against her colleagues, and her family. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that, how she's the continuing focus of these anti-COVID people out there.
Well, it's very disconcerting and alarming. I have such an enormous respect and admiration for Dr. Henry. We've spent the past year spending way more time together than either of us ever anticipated. I am grateful for her advice. I am so appreciative for the leadership she's providing in British Columbia. And for those who have disagreements or squabbles or are unhappy with the situation we find ourselves in, get in line. All of us are unhappy about where we're at, and none of it has anything to do with Dr. Henry. She is providing stellar leadership and guidance to government and to the people of the community. There's no place for those types of accusations and slanders and attacks, whether they be on social media, whether they be in a mailbox, whether they be in front of a building. I'm a politician. I signed up for this. People want to yell at me. I get that. I respect that. That's their right. But no one has a right to treat the head of the public health office the way that some people have been acting. It's absolutely inappropriate. Your parents would be ashamed of you.
Do you have a follow-up, Mary?
I don't. Thank you very much.
Our next question is from Matt Prepost, Alaska Highway News.
Hello, Premier. I'm curious whether the province plans to pursue any federal funding to pay for the increased costs of completion.
That's not contemplated at this time. We are working with the federal government on electrification plans, interties and transmission lines to move energy to parts of British Columbia that are underserviced. We want to get communities off diesel, for example. We want to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels to power our economy, and we're always in discussions with the federal government when it comes to electrification. But with respect to the construction of the Site C Clean Energy Project, that is an undertaking that's the responsibility of BC Hydro. The province wants to work with the private sector and the federal government to see where we have other opportunities to move that electricity so that we can meet our mutual objectives, federal and provincial, both orders of government, to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels.
Matt, do you have a follow-up?
I do. BC Hydro has signed a number of agreements with Peace Region communities and First Nations, contributed funds for various initiatives to offset the construction impacts. I'm wondering if the $6 billion of additional budgetary costs announced today includes any new monies for Peace Region communities for those construction impacts. If so, how much? And if not, why not?
Good last one question. The answer is no. The budget increase is focused on meeting the geotechnical challenges, the contract issues, and the impacts of COVID. That's not to say that we're not in dialogue with communities in the region, and not just about how Site C has impacted, the construction project has impacted those communities, but other ways that we can benefit from the activity that's taken place over the past number of years. I'm always open to discussing with Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities how we can work more closely together to meet the needs of those different areas. One place I would look to is the Fair Share program that's active in the Peace Country. That was brought in by at the time, Minister Mike Farnworth in the 1990s to share the resource wealth in the region with those areas that were outside of the economic activity zones. And that's been a very popular program that was started by the NDP, kept in place by the Liberals, and is still in place today. So we're always mindful of this. I think about the work that the NDP did to try and address some of the challenges of the Columbia River Treaty and the Kootenays. We established the Columbia Basin Trust so that we could continue to put back money into the region that is the benefit of the economic activity that happened there. I would say that there's more discussion to have on that question, but we're not at that place right now.
Next question is from Richard Zisman, Global.
I want to change tacks a bit here and talk about the vaccine rollout. You know, we had a federal approval today for AstraZeneca. Will British Columbians get the choice of what vaccine they can have once we start getting into mass vaccination start April?
We're going to be having, as you know, a pretty exhaustive press conference on Monday with Dr. Henry, Minister Dix, and Dr. Penny Ballum and myself to talk about where we're at with the rollout, what phase we're at, and how the AstraZeneca approval and any other approvals, whether it be the Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccine, will impact our plan going forward. But in terms of selecting from the range of options, I don't believe that's part of the plan at this point. But that's a very good question for Monday. What I will say is that we have seen an increase in shipments from the federal government of both Pfizer and Moderna, which is fantastic news. We know we've got through the 2-week period where we knew we were going to be dry, and that's behind us. The approval of AstraZeneca gives us another option to look at how we can manage the various and sundry issues and interests when it comes to the vaccination program. I believe that British Columbians should take great comfort in the fact that there are now more options. How that will play out in the months ahead is up to the public health officials, not to me.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
I look forward to that announcement on Monday. I'd also like to know what the province will do to guarantee we don't see the same rollout issues we have seen in Alberta in terms of crashing websites when people register, as well as long lines of people waiting to get their vaccine. What can you do to assure British Columbians that the resources and the foundation will be in place to not have these sort of technical challenges when people start this mass vaccination program?
Yeah, we'll be able to answer in more detail, Richard, that question on Monday. I don't want to preempt Dr. Henry and Dr. Ballum. They've been working extremely hard to make sure that we are in place and ready to go when the supply that's been committed to us by the federal government arrives. We have a plan. It's vigorous and it's focused on addressing those that are most at risk. And that, I think, is supported by the vast majority of British Columbians. Having more options like AstraZeneca and Janssen give us the opportunity as we get into phase 3 to start looking at other options. But we're pretty comfortable that the system that we have in place, starting with the 90-plus, 80-plus citizens, we know where they are by and large. Those particularly that touch upon the healthcare system during the course of their week or their month makes it easier for us to make contact directly with them. There may well be challenges with websites and registrations, but I don't want to assume that. I'm assuming that we're going to do the best we can, and we'll have a lot more to say about that on Monday.
Next question is from Laura Dillon Kane, CP.
Hi there. I'm just wondering if you can confirm that this is the last cost overrun that we'll hear about. I'm wondering how British Columbians can feel certain that you won't be up here in a year or two saying the project now costs $20 billion or $25 billion.
Well, why we took the time to make sure we got this right was we don't want to keep doing that to British Columbians. We want to make sure that, first and foremost, that we could proceed with a project that was going to be safe and provide the benefits that we all anticipate will flow from a large green energy project, 1,100 megawatts of capacity, 5,000 gigawatt hours of electricity. That helps us backstop the need for more renewables. Having that dispatchable power, having that battery, as you will, gives us the opportunity to bring on more sources of clean green supply. I am confident that the numbers that we put forward today, as based on the assessment of Treasury Board and hydro officials, are certain for today. But the future, I wouldn't have anticipated a global pandemic, so I'm holding my counsel on these questions for that very reason. I'm confident that what we've said today will be the final product. But I wasn't confident that we would. I was worried about the influenza season last year, not COVID-19.
Laura, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Our next question is from Rob Buffum, CTV2.
Oh, hi, Premier. And I guess thanks for taking my question. And I guess to the last question, if I understand it correctly, the increased $5.3 billion, half of that is attributed to COVID as well as the geotechnical issues, but that means the other half of it isn't related to COVID or geotechnical issues. So doesn't it stand to reason there is a decent likelihood this cost is going to increase at some point in the future?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, Robert, and then perhaps I'll let Bruce weigh in. The final distribution of this budget increase won't be finalized until the project is complete. We know the impact of COVID. We know the impact of the geotechnical fix to the slight movement, the 5 millimeter movement that was detected because of the superior nature of technology today. But the remaining budget items are there to manage the contracts that I've said at the outset have been challenging, and making sure that we have in place rigorous contract management processes. I don't know if, Bruce, you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Premier. The only thing that I would add would be just to say that the project is now 50% complete. So costs become, as you proceed in the project, costs become clearer. What I think is the reality of a project of this scale is that the costs are very interrelated. There are knock-on effects from one delay or one increase in costs have ramifications for the whole project. So we will be able to assess those when the project is complete. But in terms of disaggregating individual costs at this point, it's difficult to do with any real effect. Thank you.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm just wondering, Premier, back in 2017 when you announced the project was going ahead, you expressed how difficult that decision was to make in, talking about the $10.7 billion budget. If you'd known then that it was going to balloon to $16 billion, would you have gone ahead with it? And looking back, do you have any regrets that you did?
No, I mean, it was a very difficult decision in 2017. I said at that time this wasn't a project that we would have started. But once we looked at the challenges at that point, it was a write-off of some $4 billion. I didn't believe, as a new government just sworn in, that was the best way to start our relationship with the people of British Columbia. I did not want to saddle people at that time with a $4 billion hole in the ground. Well, it's now up to $10 billion of what would be foregone costs, but as Minister Ralston says, the project is half completed. River diversion has taken place. The costs going forward are going to be less than the costs that we've had behind us. But it was a tough decision at the time. This was less difficult because, quite frankly, I had come to terms with the fact that we were proceeding. I saw the benefit to 4,500 people having family-supporting jobs and being able to pay their mortgages and get their kids new hockey gear and get into a dance school and all of the things that families do. And so I appreciate there are a significant number of British Columbians who have never been supportive of this project, and they are not going to be any happier today than they were in 2017. But what I have learned, Robert, I have to say quite candidly, over the past 3.5 years is that I don't have the luxury of fretting over the past. I have an obligation to make sure I'm focused on the future. And that's what I've been trying to do since I was sworn in as Premier, the first time and the second time. I believe that this is in the best interest of British Columbians, not just for today, as I've said, but for generations to come. There were many people that were opposed to the Peace dams. There's 2 on the river already. Back in the 60s and 70s, there were people who were opposed to the dams in the Kootenays during the 60s and 70s. But to a person, I would suggest that the benefit to British Columbians of having those assets is profound. We are ahead, light years ahead of most other jurisdictions because we have those clean energy assets as we meet the challenges of climate change. So, no, I'm comfortable that we're making the right choice. If we weren't, I would make a different decision.
We have time for one last one today, and this will come from Sarah Cox Narwhal.
Yes. Can you hear me? Hello?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Premier, you mentioned the BCUC. So we have a situation where the BCUC has been asking for overdue Site C quarterly reports from BC Hydro for some time now, and that's been a bit of a theme. Will the government restore the full oversight function of the BCUC with regard to the Site C project?
Thanks very much. I've asked BC Hydro to bring the quarterly reports and the annual report up to date. They have fallen behind. There was also a series of questions that BCUC posed to BC Hydro. I've asked BC Hydro to answer those questions. Mr. Allen, who's taking over as the chair of the board, is aware of my views.
Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. As we know, there are a few other large hydro dams in the country that are seriously over budget, the Muskrat Falls Dam in Labrador, the Keeyack Dam in northern Manitoba. In both cases, there has been an inquiry. In the case of the Muskrat Falls Dam, a public inquiry. There have been calls for a public inquiry into Site C to look at what went wrong, when, and how. Has the government considered a full inquiry with testimony under oath to look at what has gone wrong with this project?
No, we haven't.
Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have.